What's up, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of We Rise Fighting Labor podcast. In today's episode, we bring you an exclusive interview with Marilee Taylor from Railroad Workers United. She's joining us to give us a better understanding of what has happened with the railway workers' struggle until now and where things can go from here. And really, without any further ado or need for delay, we're going to get right into it. Jerry, can you please lead us off? Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's podcast issue of We Rise Fighting. We are extremely happy to introduce to you today Marilee Taylor, a longtime railroad engineer and leader of Railroad Workers United, the cross-craft coalition of 110,000 workers who are currently under the gun and looking for ways to fight back against union busting to preserve, or rather to enhance a decent quality of life at work. And today we're happy to introduce Marilee Taylor again. She is a railroad engineer and recently retired, 34 years in the craft. And so I'd just like to begin, Marilee, by asking you, how did you get involved in this work and what were your early experiences?
In terms of that working on the railroad, or is the question how did I get involved in RWU?
Well, how about one at a time, working on the railroad and then getting involved with RRU?
Well, in 1987, I found myself in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a right-to-work state, and I was at that point a skilled machinist. The going wage for that was about $7.30 an hour. That is what right to work means here. And so I was looking for a better job. And I called up, they used to organize their hiring through the state unemployment office. So I called them up and asked, I called up the railroad and asked them, are they hiring? They said, we can't tell you that. That to me, given who I am, a woman trying to get this traditionally male job, told me, yes, they are hiring. That's what I heard. So I jumped on the opportunity, and I was hired as a brakeman. I became a conductor and an engineer while there. And in '93, I came to the BNSF here in Chicago, and I worked there until I retired earlier this year. And I got involved with RWU. I actually knew several of the founding members of RWU, but I had lost touch. I couldn't reach out, and I just kept missing it. I was just very happy to come back on it. RWU did a very large public campaign a few years ago, 2014, I think it was, where the actual union leadership of the United Transportation Union, today is called Smart TD, they were wanting to give away the conductors' jobs on through freight, the actual union general chairman. And we called for a no vote on this absurd contract, their proposals that they were putting out. And we explained what it was. So that's how I finally found myself. I saw a flyer, an information flyer that was put out by RWU in the yard office in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And I said, there they are. Where have you been? And from then I was able to join with the other activists that are in RWU.
Okay, thank you. We'll probably have several questions concerning the sick leave problem, because you may agree that that's critically important. So I'm just going to start off with one of them, and as we go along, we'll get into some more. But in a nutshell, what is it like to have virtually no sick days when you have such a responsible and demanding job as you have?
Well, the fact is that we have no sick days. They granted one extra personal leave day or something that you have to get approved in advance and so on and so forth. That's not a sick time. We actually have no time. The attendance policy that was imposed on the BNSF on February 1st this year was so draconian that most of us who haul freight from one city to another, as opposed to intra-city. We are on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, every single day of the year, unless we have pre-approved vacation that we're taking, or another pre-approved paid time off. We don't get holiday pay in road service. So I just want to explain that a lot of people are that we've been talking to are like, how's that possible in 2022? Well, it is possible.
Okay.
We can't even get off more than a 24-hour period within a month without facing losing our jobs. 24 hours. We're serfs. We are serfs. That they feel that they have the right, these carriers, to 99%, or however the percentage works out, to 29 out of every 30 days, that we have to be available to work, waiting on a phone call, actually working, taking rest at an away from home terminal, waiting on a train to bring back. The hours of labor have incredibly increased in the last 10 years. It just longer and longer trips, longer and longer times away from home for us. So the fight for sick leave is a very important component of what we've been struggling for. And certainly some of our brothers and sisters in the Maintenance of Way Union, the BMWED, who are the work on the tracks, maintain and build, in some cases, the railroad structures itself, including the rail, the track itself. They work outside. I live in Chicago. It's already ugly. They work outside with no real sick leave. That's why we took up the mantle of the demand for sick leave from these fellow workers. And plus, frankly, they should be paying us sick leave. They make us sick, and yet they want to pay us to take off. And I think that one thing I just want to stress is, I think one of the most important things that I would like all working people in this country and around the world to know is that we railroad workers take the safety of ourselves, our co-workers, and our communities. Those communities, and by those, our communities, excuse me, I'm referring to every single community where trains traverse. Whether it's in Racine, Wisconsin, La Crosse, wherever it is, our ability to do our job safely is the same central part of the question of our ability to maintain the public safety as best as we can. We are very attentive to our work. It is not, I am not Amtrak Joe that gets on a train, looks out the window. We who run these trains have numerous responsibilities, and it's not a walk in the park. It's very taxing. And of course, the stakes are very big. We get injured and killed on these jobs. Any kind of derailment of any volatile chemical or the crude oil bomb trains that go across our country, the danger to our communities is huge. And I'm not saying that we could necessarily prevent any kind of derailment or collision with a car or a truck on a crossing, but I'm saying that if we can be alert and attentive and are fit to work, that we can go to sleep at night knowing that we did everything in our power to prevent any loss to life or limb or property that we have done. We can close our eyes and we know we've done, and that's something that's important to us, to fight for our nameless, in some cases, neighbors that
Yes.
we go through. So I did want to raise that because the fight for safety is integrally involved in the struggle for us to have time away from the railroad. We are tired. We're exhausted. We have an exhausted workforce. They have cut the workforce on the railroad by 30% in the last few years. And yet they're moving the same amount of freight. So if they've cut the workforce by 30%, who's doing that work? Us. And that's where this attendance policy comes in, because they couldn't stand that we had a previous attendance policy of 2 weekend days, and they consider Friday a weekend. They just change all that, and they can do it by decree apparently. 5 weekdays and 2 weekend days we could take off a month, being in through freight service, unpaid, of course, unpaid. But it was time that we could. I was going to say go to church, but I'm saying that actually for my coworkers because that's not really a big problem I have. But go to church, deal with our personal and social relationships, whether it's family or interpersonal relationships on a close level, or whether it's just participating in the social intercourse that takes place in the world. Can we go to a union meeting? Most of us can't. Most of us can't. We would have to take that 24-hour period off in order to make it. And that's if we were even in town to do that. So that these fundamental issues of quality of life, of time away from the railroad, to preserve our mental, physical, emotional health is just absolutely critical for the safe operations of the railroad at the same time. The railroads have chased the dollar, nothing but the dollar, the highest rate of profit possible. And in the process, they have ruined the railroad portion of the supply chains. They got trains parked from coast to coast. And this has been going on since before 2012, at least on the railroad that I worked on. So there's a lot of disingenuous type of propaganda from not just Scab Joe, which is what I think we should change his name to, because this was, in fact, a scab operation against the rights, democratic rights that we have as unionists in this country to withhold our labor over these issues. And Biden, his administration, his cohorts, in particular Pelosi, made a point of their imperial action, that they had every right to carry out this scabbing, frankly. And I think we got to look at that front and center. The Democratic Party worked hand in glove with their counterparts in the electoral arena in order to shove an inadequate and unsafe, unfair contract down our throats. And at the same time, to wrest from us our rights, our fundamental right to organize ourselves in unions, to vote in unions. This tentative agreement was voted down, and the press, the mainstream media likes to say, oh, 4 unions. It was 55% of all rail labor who voted no, because our different unions are different sizes. The biggest one is the Smart TD. The second largest is the BLET, the engineers union. And the third is the maintenance and way union. Between those, we have an overwhelming majority, although the BLET membership voted it by a slim majority. They voted in favor of the agreement. But we operate together, all 12 unions of us, in these kinds of negotiations, which is a big step forward for us from what we have done in the past, which is let them pit one union against the other. And then the carrier reaped the benefit of that, and we did not. We workers did not. So there are a number of issues involved, and I thank you so much for the opportunity to bring this on your podcast and reach out for support in a much broader way than that we need to do. Every person who lives and works in this country should be outraged by this. And I want to say that rage is from head to toe, from coast to coast, from the border of Canada to the border of Mexico, and beyond the national borders, as workers around the world see this bastion of democracy, quote unquote, taking this kind of direct and brutal action to us, stealing our democratic right to vote. What does it mean to vote in a union? to vote it down. Now, we didn't always get to vote on our national agreements. That was a part of an internal struggle for democracy in our unions. Now we vote, and it turns out it doesn't mean shit. Excuse me. Could you edit that out? I don't mean to drop too many four-letter words here.
That's okay with us.
Okay. It just doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing. You vote all you want. Amtrak Joe is who runs this country, and Amtrak Joe will decide. Scab Joe will decide. And so that's where we are today. I just finally, this clash is not decided. It will not be decided. There will be no labor peace. There will be no labor peace until the central issues that face us are addressed. And that is the issue of time off, both compensated and non-compensated. The engineers and conductors didn't even ask for sick pay. I just think that's so significant. All we want is time. We need time away from the job in order to present ourselves fit and able to work at the time that we are called. If we're tired, there's no excuse for not working. I've been up 36 hours, which my turnaround time myself in the pool I worked in went from 30 hours 15 years ago to more than 2 days, more than 48 hours in many situations where we're away from home for that time. We're waiting to bring a train back. So we're facing longer and longer stretches away from home. We're being told, make sure you get your rest, but they won't schedule trains so that we know when we're going to get called. We are subject to call 10 hours after we show off duty from the previous train. So if I got off, let's say at 9 o'clock this morning, and I've been gone 2 days, you can imagine what kind of things I need to accomplish before I get called again. Sure. And on 10 hours from the time I showed off duty, they could call me and tell me I'm coming back. Got to work. So I may not have slept. Do you really want a fatigued railroader carrying these hazardous materials through our communities? No. Oh, we've seen what happens in Lac Mégantic. I'm saying this wrong. I don't have any French. In Canada, where the bomb train went down the hill, blew up and took out the entire town with it. That's the potential of the danger of these trains. And until we begin to address the human fatigue factor, that automatically comes into play when you're talking about a non-schedule. You have to be ready, able, and willing every minute of every day. Sickness is not allowed. We have gone to work throughout this entire pandemic. We showed up. We showed up. We moved the freight that was there. The workers did that. And this is the answer, not gratitude. We did it. We did not receive a single penny on the BNSF as any kind of recognition for what we were putting ourselves through, the dangers of infection of this COVID and other things. We received no compensation for that. Instead, what we got February 1st was an attendance policy that took away our ability, all things being equal, to take off 7 days in a 30-day period for activities other than work, where we would not be called, to one 24-hour period in a 30-day period. That was the thank you that we got from the carriers. And it remains the issue. And until it's resolved, that is our central issue. You did not hear rail workers talking about an increase. This wage increase is negligible. It's eaten up by increased healthcare costs, co-share payment or co-insurance. Some they have a name for it. And it's eaten up by inflation. You know, the Social Security, I upped it around 8%, or is going to in January, based on the inflation. But yet we've already worked 3 years into this contract and we haven't received anything. So it's not a great economic thing either. What
No.
it does is it reflects 50 years of not fighting and getting a decent contract on the wage side of things. We have not had, in my opinion, a decent contract since the early 70s. And this
Thank
is
you.
not and this is not putting us in a stead where we will be ahead of inflation when this contract ends in 2 years. And then we're back in the same negotiations with the same Railway Labor Act hoops and machinations that we have to go through, repeated alleged cooling off periods, just things that are meant to really oppress those of us who work on the railroad in a fundamental way where you never can get away from it. You are at their beck and call for the overwhelming majority of every breath you take. And if you try to stand up and say, I'm not fit to work, I am too tired, then they initiate disciplinary proceedings against us and they put us on the street.
Okay, Marilee.
Three violations in their terms. And that's it, you're gone. And then you go through 2 years of arbitration to try to get your job back. But that's the degree to which these corporations, Wall Street corporations, hedge fund corporations, have operated in really decimating the ranks of labor and the ranks that remain, working them to an early grave. For us, this is literally a question of life and death. Ours, our coworkers, and our neighbors in whatever communities that we work through or in.
Okay, thank you, Marilee. Rick?
Hey, Marilee, yeah, my question is this. It's December 4th. The deadline is coming up in 5 days. What is your general assessment of what can happen, what direction things can go in, up to and leading to December 9th, and what direction things can go in after December 9th? And how can the community show support?
With the December 9th actually doesn't mean anything anymore since Biden and the Democratic and Republican electoral parties decided to shove this down our throat. So there is no more cooling off period because we're deep freezed. Frankly, we're in the sub-zero weather in terms of what the government has tried to constrain us with. So that date is
Got it. That I
it's kind of
misunderstood.
not play is what I'm saying.
Okay, all right.
But
Thank you.
I didn't mean to step on you there.
No, not at all. Thank you for correcting, what I was thinking about December 9th. For some reason, I thought it was still on the table. So thank you for clarifying on that.
What is still on the table, Eric, is really I'm trying to find a way to explain this. This whole question will be resolved really only by rail workers acting in concert with their allies and not in the trade union movement and far, far beyond that. What form that will take particularly, we don't know. None of us know. I think a lot of people are shocked and dismayed by the betrayal in their minds of the Biden administration. I think a lot of people didn't think that in the United States of America in the year 2022 that was even a real possibility. So as we begin to assimilate this knowledge and information and digest it, of course, there'll be a broad discussion amongst the ranks of labor as what next. And already, if you just tune into social media, you'll see numerous ideas of where people think we need to go. And of course, that's a discussion for us to have in our ranks and amongst our allies, which we're continuing to do.
Okay, one follow-up question, Marilee. Throughout the course of you talking with us here today, you've brought up the question of democracy a few times. And what we like to do on our podcast is talk about theory and analysis a little bit. So some folks aren't familiar with union democracy, and I noticed that that was one of the unifying principles for Railway Workers United. So I was just hoping you could speak on that a little bit, maybe for someone who's new to the labor movement. Why is union democracy important? What is it? Sort of thing, very basic.
Well, our unions and the railroad have been around for 150 years, and how they started and what they've become are kind of different animals. For us to be able to have free discussions within our union formations, whether you call them locals or divisions or whatever, has been a fight that we across this country have had to wage within our unions, because not everybody shares the same understanding of what unions can or should be within the union movement. So the fight has taken different forms in terms of workers owning more of their unions. For example, we vote on our contract, one person, one vote. If you choose, it's like any other election. If you choose not to cast a ballot, you choose not to cast. We seek to win everybody to participate. But that's first and foremost, the right to vote on our contracts, the right to vote on who is in office within the union are things that we can't take for granted, because they were hard battles won within not just the labor movement, but in the broader society, to win people and bring pressure to bear on our fights for democracy. And it's true across the board in every industry. The steel workers, UAW, everywhere. It's a continual thing, because it strengthens us. When we own our organizations, it strengthens us, the actual ownership, and being able to use them as a tool to defend our interests. And the strike is the only tool, I would say, the only tool, when you come down to it, that we have, that is to withhold our labor. And yes, it is meant to crush the railroad bosses. Yes, it's meant to do that. No one wants to go out on strike. Nobody wants to do that in the middle of winter with the 20 below and the wind blowing up your pant leg. Nobody wants to do that. And any strike that we would take, first and foremost, I would say it's a strike not to sit and see who can outlast the other holding a sign. The point of a strike is to shut it down so that the carriers pay the price, so they know that they must negotiate. They have refused. They have been intransigent. In terms of attendance policies, the only thing that we were demanding was that those policies be negotiated with the union, instead of imposed in the imperial manner in which Biden and his ally Warren Buffett and the rest of the railroad robber barons are in cahoots and in concert with in their actions against us. So yes, the reason for a strike is to make it hurt the same way that they have making us hurt day after day. And our perspective is, if we're on strike, we're in it to win it. We're not in it just to be pretty on camera. We're in it to win it. And that means shutting them down, because the only language they understand, the only language these rail bosses understand, is the dollar sign. That's it.
Okay. Marilee, how has the support you've been getting for the struggle been, and what are the best forms of support you would like to see happen?
Well, RWU, Railroad Workers United, has received a tremendous amount of outpouring of support from, in particular, trade unions. One of them I'd point out is the International Longshoremen Workers Union, who the workers that load and unload the ships up and down the west coast of this country. The longshoremen are also without a contract, fighting for a contract. So we have a lot of convergences that we didn't organize because it's just we didn't have anything to do with it, but here we are. So now we have increasing ability to reach out to other workers in many different sectors to win support, not only for us, solidarity for our struggle, but to show that solidarity to other workers who are in struggle. And I think that if we took a vote today in all the rail unions, I think the vote would be, even amongst those who voted in favor of this tentative agreement, I think the margins would be much, much huger against it, went against this agreement across rail labor, the ranks of labor. Oops, excuse me. I almost knocked you down there. The ranks of rail labor in this entire country. So I think that's kind of where we're at. And what people can do, there are many things. First of all, I like to point out our website. You can stay informed by just going on our website, railroadworkersunited.org. Every week we put out a labor type newsletter of different things going on in different unions. There's a wealth of information on that website. So I'd like to just make a plug for it, because if you're interested in doing anything in solidarity with rail workers, this is one of the first and premier places that you'll find good information and be able to make the connections that we all need to make if we're going to fight together to improve our situation here as workers in this country.
Actually,
we're the majority, but we have the minority of rights.
I have to highlight great information. I've been following Railroad Workers United website, trying to keep myself and our listeners informed. And y'all do a wonderful job of keeping us informed, on a weekly basis, and also with an email listserv, which I encourage people to join. Now, Marilee, question from me, because I've been asked, and I've asked myself, why are they denying these sick days? Okay, and this is where I'm coming from. I mean, you crunch the numbers, and no matter how you crunch the numbers, like these railroad companies just made $81.5 billion in the last 3 months. And no matter how you crunch the numbers on the sick days, it can't be a financial burden when you're making those kinds of profits. So I've speculated a few ideas on the show as to why precisely why they're denying y'all sick days, or why they did. But I would prefer to hear it from you. What is your take on this?
Well, I think it's pretty clear the railroads want to get free labor. That's what it's all about. Make us work for no more compensation, do more work per person because they don't want to hire people. And in fact, they are going to have many difficulties retaining workers. I think we will see workers voting with their feet on this contract. That is the attrition that has already occurred, especially amongst the layer of people who have honed their craft, that are good, that are capable. Engineers and conductors and the other crafts. So we're seeing people leave with 15 years seniority, 20 years. This was unheard of 40 years ago, because who would leave a job like that? Well, because it's not the job that it was 40 years ago, and it's these exact attacks that have come down from the carriers, who increasingly are monopolies. We went from over 40 Class 1 railroads. It's Class 1 based on the mileage, how far they actually move freight, to 7 today, through these unholy buyouts and mergers and so on. And it's all with the same intent in mind. The term they use is precision scheduled railroading. You'll hear that a lot in the broader press. And there's absolutely nothing precision about it. There's absolutely not service involved. And it sure as hell has nothing to do with railroading. It's a business model meant to extract profits at the highest rate possible, without regard to the human carnage that they create by doing that. And I'm so glad that you brought up how much money I have I have trouble keeping all these statistics quite on my head, but now for years, every single quarter is a record profit quarter. And we're talking billions, the B word, the billions of dollars. They have spent billions in stock buybacks, which artificially gives out dividends, is what it ends up being. They buy back their own stock, kicks the price up. So the price between what you had this morning before they did the buyback and tonight, what your stock is worth, is a surplus. So the big shareholders reap in profit after profit after profit. So myself, I'm of the opinion that it's taking care of the workers and paid sick time is part of the cost of doing business. I don't care how much money you're making. If you can't afford that, you shouldn't be in business.
Marilee, who else can drive a train, repair a track, and change signals to avoid crash ups besides you all?
Exactly. No one. All this labor that you're discussing, who can move the trains? Well, I could give you the keys to the locomotive, but I'm pretty sure you wouldn't get too far. So we have an opportunity of time between the point at which we withdraw our labor and the point at which they can train anybody to even carry out a semblance of that work and move the goods. That is where I think the clear understanding going in that we're in it to win it. It needs to understand we have to do it in that way, and we have to be strong, forceful, and they have to bleed back. I mean, we can't do it any other way. So what the government, the Biden administration, and all the rest of both parties have been able to do is obfuscate these questions, turn us into the boogeyman. We used to call that, I don't know if that's even a current term, but we're the bad guys and the fear mongering. Well, it will be hundreds of thousands of jobs, $2 billion a day. Well, $2 billion a day, quite frankly, is a drop in the bucket compared to the profits that they make every day. But yes, it would hurt. Yes, it would hurt. And I would hope, and I believe in my soul, that we would be able to reach out to the overwhelming majority of workers and small businesses, farmers, including farmers, to join our fight, even if it meant sacrificing a little bit for the common, broader good. And of course, the other big boogie, the big straw man, or whatever you want to say, is the fear mongering. Your kids won't have a Christmas. Santa ain't coming if these bad railroad workers are on strike. Santa, we're not going to. We remember when the companies refused to ship goods like toilet paper, sanitizer. In the city of Chicago, we couldn't find any of that. Not even excuse me 1 minute. That's a work-related thing. That's why it's still on. I'm sorry. It's rude. I'm so sorry. But at any rate, that we know what it is to not have the goods we need. It was a fight on the railroad, and the railroads retaliated against us. We had to fight to get things like wipes, disinfecting wipes, because as you can imagine, the surfaces within the cabs of the locomotives where we live for sometimes 16 hours because we can't get relieved, it's filthy. So we have to be able to maintain our health. Railroads didn't even want to. They got a railroad now. Our national office is in Fort Worth. They got rail going all directions, east, west, north. They could ship their own goods. They could buy up the goods where it was available, put it on a rail car, and get it to all the workers. They couldn't even do that. They refused to even attempt to do that. So the idea that they're going to hold on to their money and not spend a dime on this workforce is not a new story from these this sector of the ruling rich. When we discuss the ownership of the railroads, we have to understand that this is the 1/10 of 1% who own these railroads and make all these profits. It's not your local eatery or something. We're talking massive billionaire operation, and they're going to try to squeeze everything out of it. And we have every right, and I cannot say this strongly enough, we have every democratic right to strike over our issues. And I think that I can't imagine any sector of the population of this country who lives and works here would think anything different than that.
Okay, Marilee, I want to be respectful of your time here. I have another question, and let's feel things out after that. But there's a lot going on in the labor movement right now with Amazon workers, with the longshore workers, as you mentioned. The UAW is on strike. Starbucks workers are very active. What words would you like to communicate to them? Any words of wisdom? Any words of solidarity? Young workers, just that.
Well, first of all, I'd like to salute the workers who are organizing themselves, not just at Amazon, at Starbucks, at I believe it's Bessemer, Alabama, the coal strike that's going on. There was a picket near me in Chicago here yesterday. I was hoping to get to, but we got slammed with a lot of other stuff. But a fellow worker went to and they're health care workers who are on strike, fighting for patient ratios to enable health care to be meaningful to the people that come seeking it. That is, that a nurse or a doctor doesn't have 20 patients.
That's right.
A patient caregiver ratio that could actually keep us alive and move forward in that. So that all these workers I have been in motion. And I think what we're seeing is all proportions guarded, and certainly I don't want to be hyperbolic about it, but we are seeing a seismic shift here. Something is happening, and we all can feel it. We know it. It may not be what we can actually see, although you all have pointed out to many examples that we actually can see this motion happening, but it's there. And while we can't determine the pace of it or what actions will actually be taken, for example, by the ranks of labor around this railroad issue, we know there's stuff going on because there is workers feel it in their bones. They feel these attacks in their bones, but they also see the possibility of reaching out to working people in a mass manner, organizing ourselves to unite in action against these attacks that we are facing across every industry, because those who are part of the ruling rich, and in my opinion, their electoral parties, both the Dems and the Reps, are continuing on their campaign to get more and more billions of dollars in profits. So we face the same conditions, and the sooner we figure that out, that we are our allies, and as soon as we need to, one thing that RWU does is we extend solidarity to other workers, and we bring them in to try to reach out in a fundamental way to not just rail workers, but other people, other workers. And just one final thing, I'm not going to even try to get into it today because it's a time-consuming discussion. But RWU calls for the nationalization of the railroads.
Yes.
If they can't run it, it's a national resource that belongs and should belong and serve the interests of working people and their needs in this country first and foremost. And I would include passenger rail as one of the needs that we have that has been embargoed by these freight railroads since the early 70s. And Amtrak is the substitute. Well, it's not nearly enough adequate. It's not nearly adequate. So that's one of the campaigns that we're on, and we've received a whole lot of interest, a whole lot of interest. And I also think that as we go through this struggle, we'll see the forces emerge in a more obvious way that can lead this struggle, because we need not just new blood in terms of entering into leadership of our unions and so on, but we need a new perspective. We need a strategy that is different, a strategy that relies on ourselves first and foremost, and our allies, whether that's environmentalists, whether that's workers in other industries, other trade unionists, the women's rights struggle. All of these struggles are necessary for working people to identify with and to unify ourselves with. And we're seeing a beginning of that. And I think that one thing we have to just keep in mind at all times is the strategy question. We know it doesn't work. Look at us. Now we have to stay in this draconian situation. If we listen to what the pundits tell us, there is no way to fight. Then there is no strategy that will work except independent political action of ourselves and our allies joined together to fight for what is right for the working people of this country.
Thank you so much, Marilee Taylor. We're going to leave it at that. This has been an incredibly insightful discussion today. Thank you again for your time. We hope that this isn't the only time we have you on the show. But yeah, thank you to you, and thank you to the listeners who tuned in. Tune in again next week. We will have the news again and more material for you. Have a good night, everyone. Solidarity and love to all.
Thank you so much.